We do have some breaking news right off the top here at the Rachel Maddow Show. Rachel is off tonight. She will be back in the new year. But Donald Trump has given an impromptu interview with Michael Schmidt of the New York Times. I have that interview right in front of me. I'm going to read you just a little bit of it. He didn't make any new news. He made some reassertions, but it's very interesting. Right off the top, it says here that Donald Trump said Thursday that he believes Robert Mueller, the special counsel in the Russia investigation, will treat him fairly, contradicting some members of his party who have waged a weeks-long campaign to try to discredit Mr. Mueller and the continuing inquiry. During an impromptu 30-minute interview with the New York Times at his golf club in West Palm Beach, the president did not demand an end to the Russia investigations swirling around his administration, but insisted 16 times that there has been no collusion discovered by the inquiry. Quote, "It makes the country look very bad, and it puts the country in a very bad position," Trump said of the investigation. So the answer, it's worked out. It's better. The sooner it's worked out, the better it is for the country. Just a little bit more. Asked whether he would order the Justice Department to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, Trump appeared to remain focused on the Russia investigation, and he said the following: I have the absolute right, he said, to do what I want to do with the Justice Department. He said, echoing claims by his supporters that as president, he has the power to open or end an investigation. But for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter. And I believe Michael Schmidt is on the phone with us. He's one of the reporters who broke that story just a few minutes ago. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
There's just a couple of interesting points just as I'm racing through this article. This seemed to be an impromptu interview. How did you guys, is this something that you formally worked out with the White House, or did you just happen to run into him on the golf course?
Well, I was at the club today where he plays. I had been brought there, and we were eating lunch, and he was sitting next to us, and I had spoken to him before over the summer, and he was very excited to talk about the tax bill that had just passed, and I said, well, if you're going to talk about it, why don't we talk about it, on the record? And I was able to interview him.
And you, according to this piece that's published now in the New York Times, for those of you who are just tuning in, Trump gave the interview at the Grill Room at Trump International Golf Club after he ate lunch with his playing partners, including his son Eric and the pro golfer Jim Herman. There were no aides present for the interview. The president sat alone with the New York Times reporter at a large round table as club members chatted and ate lunch nearby. A few times, members and friends, including longtime supporter Christopher Ruddy, who's the president and chief executive of Newsmax, a conservative web and TV company, came by to speak with Trump as well. At any point, did aides break in to maybe help Trump out with some talking points, or did you have him all to yourself?
No, there weren't really many aides around. It was just him. He had played golf with his son. He really enjoys being around the club there because he has a lot of supporters that are members, and he spends a lot of time talking to them. And it's just sort of he was just kind of just hanging out there, and I happened to be there to see him. And he's someone that really likes to engage. I mean, you see it when he's leaving the White House. He often stops and will speak with members of the media as he's getting on the plane. And, I think, he feels aggrieved in part by the Russia investigation. And on the other hand, he really wants to tout the things that he's done this year, especially the tax bill, which he had not really had many successes at all this year legislatively, but that really gave it to him. So he believes he's his best salesman, and he wants to tell his story. And, I think if you can get him, you can get him.
And he did say here, is sort of bragging that saying that disputing reports that suggest that he doesn't have a detailed understanding of the tax legislation. Says, I know the details of taxes better than anybody, better than the greatest CPA. I know the details of healthcare better than everybody. That's a typical Trump speak. But I want to go back to the Mueller investigation. I'm very interested in this. 16 times, essentially.
Had maintained control and not recused, then Mueller wouldn't exist. And he pins that directly on Sessions. And there's a long-standing expectation from administration officials and people around Sessions that as the Russia investigation heats up, he will really go after Sessions. His criticisms of Sessions today were not that strong. I've seen him be much harsher about Sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael Schmidt, good get from the New York Times, the reporter who just interviewed Donald Trump at his golf club in Florida. Congratulations on the scoop, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Treat him fairly. But he says the investigation, quote, makes the country look very bad. That's according to the New York Times, which also reports the president insisted a stunning 16 times there has been no collusion discovered by Mueller's investigation. But the president also returned to a familiar theme, complaining that Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself and pointedly saying, quote, Holder protected President Obama. A lot to get to, but I want to start with Michael Shear, who helped break the story for the New York Times. He's also a CNN political analyst, and he joins us now via Skype. Michael, I'm so glad that you could join us for the story that's in the New York Times this evening. Your colleague,
Sure.
Michael Schmidt, landed an impromptu interview with the president today, and the big headline, he believes the special counsel will treat him fairly in the Russia investigation.
Yeah, no, that's right. It was about a half-an-hour interview and totally impromptu down at the president's golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida. But there was a lot there. The thing that struck us most was the comments that the president made about the Russia investigation, notably that he thought Bob Mueller was going to be fair to him, which really undercuts and undermines an argument that many in his party have been making for the last several weeks, that they've been attempting to discredit and undermine Mueller's investigation, calling it partisan. So this kind of goes against that. But at the same time, as you said, the president repeated a lot of the complaints and criticisms that he's had about the investigation. And in fact, at one point said that, made a reference to the Justice Department and said that he thought he could do whatever he wants with the Justice Department, although for the moment he's not doing that.
Okay, a lot to get through in this article. Let me read this part of it again. It says, it makes the country look very bad, and it puts the country in a very bad position. So the sooner it's worked out, the better it is for the country. And then again, he reiterated 16 times that there has been no collusion. At least that's what he believes.
Right. I mean, so the bit about what it looks like for the country came after Mike asked him a question about timing and whether or not he was concerned that the investigation wasn't concluding more quickly. That you'll remember that the president's aides had reported to him they thought the investigation would end first by Thanksgiving and then by the end of this year. It's clearly not ending that quickly. And so Mike said, does that concern you? And what the president said was, no, it doesn't concern me, except that it's really bad for the country. And he sort of repeated that in a bunch of different ways, saying that he thought that the longer this goes on, the worse it is for the country.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you just said, and I'm going to read the quote here. It says, I have the absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department, but for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter. And that's a quote from the piece from the president. Talk to me more about that. What was this in response to? Do you know?
Yeah. So Mike had been discussing the Russia investigation, and that naturally turns, as it often does with the president. The president sort of made it turn to the email inquiry involving Hillary Clinton. And so at one point, Mike said to the president, you have control over the Justice Department, right? Are you going to order them to renew the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails? The president's answer, which you just read, is entirely verbatim of what he said following that question, and it seemed to sort of skip over the part about Hillary Clinton and really focus more on the part about the Justice Department and whether or not he controls it. Because as you read, it's really not a reference that we can determine anyway to the Hillary Clinton emails. It's really more a reference back. He wasn't containing himself. There wasn't an aide there to stop him, and so he just sort of went on a lot of different topics. It was a really interesting interview.
Michael, fascinating. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Sure, happy to do it.
And by the way, Chris Ruddy is supposed to join us in a little bit here on CNN. We hope that he will get to us as well. I know that he's very busy this holiday season, but he has promised to check in with us and give us some insight on this interview and what's happening at Mar-a-Lago as well. I want to bring in now Chris Cillizza, CNN politics editor at large, CNN political commentator David Swerdlick, and CNN political analyst April Ryan. Hello to all of you. Fascinating, huh? Don't you think? Chris, what do you think?
Well, okay, first of all, Mike Shear, former colleague of mine, wonderful guy, great reporter. That out of the way. Donald Trump, okay, he says lots of things, and I know you went through some of it, Don. I think we're going to go through more of it. Let me just make this point. This is evidence yet again that Donald Trump does not hate the media. Donald Trump loves the media. He saw reporters down there, spoke to them for 30 minutes, no staff. Staff was unaware he was doing it. Donald Trump consumes more media, craves the attention of the media, craves the approval of the media more so than any modern president. Fact, the end.
Yeah, he loves the media. but it's sort of a political ploy, well, to pretend that he doesn't like the media because it works with his base. But we all know as New Yorkers, he used to pretend that he was his own press person. He loves the media. So listen, what do you make of this impromptu interview with the Times? He thinks the counsel, David, the special counsel will treat him fairly. Are you surprised to hear that?
Not totally. I agree with Chris that the president likes the media, and in this case, he's trying to use the media, in this case the New York Times, to have his cake and eat it too. He said over and over again in the interview, there was no collusion, no collusion, no collusion, and at the same time, Mueller will be fair. He's not worried about it. He's sitting there having lunch down in Florida. He wants to be seen as both not worried about it, but also still push this narrative that there's nothing to see here and that this investigation by Mueller has no point to it, even though it was earlier this year that he was saying, I had nothing to do with, and no one that in my circle had nothing to do with Russia, and that narrative has proved to be not true.
Yeah, April, that leads us right to this. What do you make of the fact that the president brought up 16 times that there was, quote, no collusion?
The president wants to believe and feels that there's no collusion. He really hopes that there's no collusion. And he even went to Alan Dershowitz, talking about Alan Dershowitz, who is a liberal Democrat, and how he says there's no collusion. But, you know, collusion is hard to prove. But obstruction of justice is something different. And that's on the table as well. So the collusion issue, he may have a piece there. But
April,
when it goes
hold
to
on. You brought up something that I think is very important because his supporters, Trump TV.
For one, the reason that we have a special counsel, Don, is because the Deputy Attorney General in the Trump Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, decided that one was required given the circumstances. Bob Mueller was a Republican who was appointed by George W. Bush, a Republican president, as head of the FBI. It's difficult to say, well, the president on the one hand has a point because there's just no evidence here that Democrats are the ones at the heart of this. I think what he's pinning it on is what we have learned that Hillary Clinton, through an attorney named Mark Elias and the DNC, funded this dossier by Christopher Steele, this anti-Trump dossier by Christopher Steele, a former British spy. But that is not the only piece of this investigation by a long shot.
It's not even mentioned in any of the indictments that have been handed down. It's not even mentioned in there.
No, again, to conflate that dossier, which the Justice Department has confirmed parts of and has not other parts, to say that that's the entire special counsel investigation is misleading at best.
Yeah. So then why do you think he says he could do what he wants with the Justice Department but because he wants to be treated fairly, he is staying out of it? Why do you think, David? But then he hones in that he wants to be treated fairly.
Don, I think, again, throughout all this, the president likes to keep his options open. Wants to be seen as calm, cool, and collected sitting down in Florida. At the same time, throws that line out there to say, look, at any time I could pull the plug on this if I want. He can't go directly, but he can get rid of Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General, then get rid of Mueller that way. He has the power because the Justice Department ultimately reports through him. I also agree with Chris that the president is sort of flooding the zone when it comes to Democrats and Russia. He says John Podesta's brother, he says Fusion GPS, he says this, he says that, but he doesn't present a theory of the case as to what Democrats and Russia would have been working on together. And that's why I think it's been so thin, and that's why it hasn't gained the traction I think that it otherwise would have. That question has not been answered by the president or any other Republicans who have brought this up.
April, the president also talks about Roy Moore and says that he never really wanted to support him, saying he knew he would lose in the general, and he had to do it because he's the head of the Republican Party. Is he making excuses for being a two-time loser in Alabama? Because he did stomp for Roy Moore. He endorsed him. He supported him. He campaigned for him.
Yes, he's making excuses, but this president walked away from what he considered a loser right away. It was that night, and Don, we were on the air together. The president said, you know, he sent his congratulations to Doug Jones right away and left Moore. And Moore he and the president hadn't even talked, and the president at that time didn't even know that Roy Moore wasn't going to concede. So this president is trying to pick up the pieces, looking towards 2018. You know, he's saying the right things, but this president did go go in full throttle for Roy Moore. Even there was such a bright, blaring, red-hot spotlight on the issue of sexual misconduct, alleged sexual misconduct, that even pointed toward the president was still all in. But once Roy Moore lost, and it might have actually been one of the best things for the president, because once Roy Moore lost, it took that spotlight right off of the president and off of Roy Moore and
the sexual harassment allegations
that we were
against the president.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I gotta run, April.
This Roy Moore thing, I believe. Okay.
Well, you couldn't finish your thought. I mean, come on now. I'm not that mean.
Okay. Well, I just. No, you're not. You're a good guy.
Hey,
No,
Don,
I just think that Roy Moore. This might. I think this is just an albatross around the president's neck that he's glad that's off.
All right, quick, David.
Oh, I was just going to say, the night Trump now wants to claim Luther Strange, the night he was supposed to be down in Alabama endorsing Strange was the night he brought up the controversy with the NFL players. That was the headline. The endorsement of Strange was buried. Now he wants to say, oh, I was behind Strange. But it was a lukewarm endorsement of the
Don't forget, he
lukewarm
deleted the
kind.
Luther Strange endorsement tweets, too.
Distractions. And by the way, Roy Moore still hasn't conceded, even though they certified the election today.
And he won't.
For the other person.
It's done. It's
He didn't
over.
concede in
It's
2006 or 2010 either, Don.
How embarrassing. Yeah. Happy New Year, y'all.
Happy New Year, Don.
Happy New Year, Don.
See
It's
ya.
over.
We come back. Why President Trump claims the New York Times would fail without him. His words, look very bad. Here to discuss, CNN presidential historians Douglas Brinkley and Timothy Neftali, also Washington Post contributor Sally Quinn, author of Finding Magic. Hello, good to see you.
Hey.
Good to see all of you. Sally's dressed for the season. Anyway, so listen, I want to get your reaction to what might be President Trump's last interview of the year. The New York Times published it just a short time ago. So, Sally, first, what stood out to you?
Early.
Sally, can you hear me?
Can you turn it up a little bit?
She can't hear me. So, Tim, I'll ask you. What stood out to you?
What stood out to me? Well, my sense was he was trying to show off. He was in the middle of a restaurant, of a cafe at the club. What stood out to me, first of all, is that the basic themes that the president has provided us. He doesn't believe there's a reality behind the hacking issue. For him, it's all about collusion, which he didn't commit, and the whole issue was created as a hoax by the Democrats, who are sore losers. He is pushing this idea that he's tried to be bipartisan, but that Democrats, like the senator from West Virginia, wouldn't do his part. So it's the same story. He is just providing us with an alternative reality to try to explain away everything that people criticize him for. In the end, Alabama wasn't his fault. It's the mistake of the local GOP. He wasn't supportive of Moore. He knew Moore would lose. It's that same story over and over again. Yeah. And sadly, we hoped he would stop. At some point, he would realize there was a reality beyond the rhetoric, but he hasn't so far.
Douglas, I want to bring you in now. I don't want to be part of the interview before I get your reaction to it. He says, I know the details of taxes better than anybody, better than the greatest CPA. I know the details of health care better than most. And he also told the New York Times he knows more about the big bills debated in Congress than any president that's ever been in office. That's not been the impression of many who worked on those bills, correct?
Well, of course not. And that's just more Donald Trump BS, patting himself on the back. He gets bored when he's at Mar-a-Lago and the press is swirling outside there. And he's been very angry at the Washington Post the last months. In fact, all of 2017, the Post investigative journalists have been stunning. So he tends to be a little more favorable, oddly, to the New York Times once in a while. But my takeaway from what's important here is he's obsessed with Mueller. Here it is in the holiday. He should be taking a break from it, but he keeps trying to say, I didn't collude over and over again. He never mentions obstruction of justice because he's going to be charged with that. The record's pretty clear that justice was obstructed. So I think it's just showing him to be a bit in a panic zone right now, but trying to act cool and collected.
Yeah, I think, Douglas, you're right. I think most people woke up on Christmas morning surprised that the president was talking about the Russia investigation instead of just, enjoying the season or sending out well wishes to the country, not only the country, but the world. Sally, let me bring you in here now. The president also goes on to say the following: another reason that I am going to win another 4 years is because newspapers, television, all forms of media will tank if I'm not there, because without me, their ratings are going down the tubes. Without me, the New York Times will indeed be not the failing New York Times, but the failed New York Times. By the way, the last time the cable people and newspapers have had these sort of ratings was when Barack Obama took office, and they were even higher then. So that's the reality here. So he, of course, said that directly to the New York Times reporter, though. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he ain't whistling Dixie. I think he's absolutely right. I mean, look at us right now. Here we are, just talking about Donald Trump. I mean, everybody was having a nice sort of pre-New Year's Eve rest, and suddenly he's out there talking about collusion, and I can do anything I want with the Justice Department, and if that's not speaking softly and carrying a big stick, I don't know what it is, because it's, of course, Mueller's going to treat me fairly because there's no collusion. However, I can do anything I want with the Justice Department. So, I mean, I think, he's definitely great copy for newspapers. He's great on television. And I think he may not be wrong that, people are going to tune out less when you have this incredible entertainment show. And I think one of the reasons that it's so entertaining is because he changes his mind all the time. And if you look at what he goes through, I mean, in this 1 week of the sort of anti-Mueller craziness, and then Mueller's going to treat me fairly, and then the Russians talk to the North Koreans, and then it's the Jerusalem, and then we love we may or may not do something with the Iranians. I mean, everything he says, he changes his mind all the time, and so you're just kind of constantly trying to keep up. But wait a minute, he said that. Wait a minute, and it's fascinating. It's riveting.
Well, but there's a whole different thing. He says a reason I'm going to win another 4 years is because newspapers, television, of all forms of media will tank if I'm not there, because without me, their ratings are going to go down the tubes. Without me, the New York Times will indeed not be the failing New York Times, but the failed New York Times. Timothy, it's interesting because I think people, listen, there is only so much of a sideshow that people want to witness and see, and I think many people have had their fill of it, and I don't think that the media would go out of business if there were no Donald Trump. Maybe the ratings would be different, but I doubt that the New York Times would go out of business if Donald Trump was not in office.
But Don, the way in which the president said this tells you so much about him. He is convinced the world is rigged. What he said in that interview was, the media won't let me lose. 6 months before the election, they're going to start to say nice things because they need me. So the worldview he shared with us is a completely conspiratorial worldview. And that's what I found most interesting about that comment. By the way, the other thing he said that we just have to mention is that he's the world's best CPA. Apparently, he understands taxes better than the best CPA in the country. So what was amazing was the hyperbole. He just kept just producing this incredible sense of self. And at one point, you have to ask, is this all a show, or does he believe it?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Well, Douglas, if he knows better than
Can I just say something about that?
Yeah, quickly, because I've got to get to Douglas. Go ahead.
Okay, but I do think that he says things that he believes 1 minute and then changes his mind.
Yeah.
I think that happens all the time. I don't think he believes anything all the time the same.
If he knows better than the CPAs, and perhaps Douglas Brinkley, he might be able to explain his tax returns to us.
Yeah, why doesn't he open his own taxes? He hides his taxes. It's ridiculous that he hasn't released them. And this notion that he's vastly entertaining and the media needs him, he's a president with a 35% approval rating. 2/3 of the country are giving his show a big thumbs down. The New York Times has been in existence since 1851. It's going to continue to be a great newspaper, and Donald Trump will be long gone. And I think many times readers are kind of have Trump fatigue. They're not excited to wake up tomorrow and read more about Donald Trump. The Times covers them because they have to. But the idea that all of these media outlets would go down the tubes without him is obviously a self-aggrandizement.
Yeah, as I always say, the president comes with term limits. Journalism does not. Yeah, thank you, panel.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. Happy New Year to you. When we come back, I'm going to talk to one of President Trump's close friends who was in the room with the president during his impromptu interview today.
Get the facts first.
I can't trust you on any level when I think you're going to BS me. It matters who runs. It matters who fights the fight.
Over and over 16 times that no collusion has been discovered. That is according to a new interview with the New York Times. It took place at the Trump International Golf Club with some of the president's friends stopping by. Joining me now on the phone, one of those friends who joins us here regularly on this program, and that's Christopher Ruddy. He's the CEO of Newsmax. Happy holidays to you, Chris. I hope you had a great Christmas. You were at Mar-a-Lago with the president. You were part of this interview with the New York Times. Just briefly, they mentioned you. He had some surprising things to say about the Mueller investigation.
Hello.
Can you hear me, Chris? Okay, I don't think we have Chris. Do we not? All right, we'll work to get Chris back. Let's bring the panel. Let's bring the panel in now. We got Ben Ferguson and Tara Setmeyer here with me. So we were going to talk about what Chris said, but why don't we talk about this interview in the New York Times? The president saying, Tara, that he believes that Robert Mueller will treat him fairly. It's sort of the opposite of what has been said, especially by his supporters, and what has been said on the Fox channel, on the other cable channel. What do you think?
I find that to be very interesting. I almost wonder if he's doing that to project that, I think another guest said something similar, to project that everything's fine, that he has it under control. I do find that interesting because, once again, you have all of these Republicans, committee chairmen, surrogates, everybody's now, this has been a concerted effort for the last few weeks to try to undermine the FBI, the investigation, Mueller.
It's even different than what the president has said himself.
Exactly, different than what he's tweeted. I just think that when he's in an unfiltered moment by himself with no aides, there's no telling where his mind is, because it's always, what do they say? The last person he spoke to, or what he watched on Fox and Friends that day. So I think it's just a way of him trying to project that everything is fine, I have it under control. But we all know that this is a real thing. This is a real investigation. There's nothing fake about any of it. And I think that those that have been out there going against Mueller, who used to say that Mueller was beyond reproach in his respectability, now those folks are probably going, oh no, what are we doing now, because the president's off message.
Well, most of them have said that he was respected until this particular
conveniently
moment.
Until he's after their guy.
Ben, I've got to. Okay, Ben, you're going to have to stand by. Chris, are you there?
Sure.
I thought you hung up on me, Chris. How are you? Happy holidays to you. I hope you had a great Christmas. I understand that you spent part of it at Mar-a-Lago with the president. Thank you very much. So again, you were part of this interview, although briefly. You were just mentioned. You came up and spoke with the president, as others were speaking to the president. The president apparently saying to the New York Times that he thinks that Mueller will treat him fairly. He's going to get a fair shake. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Look, the president has said all along that he is not guilty of any crime. He's been cooperating fully with the Mueller investigation. The president could have exercised executive privilege many, many times on things involving the White House. They have not. They've been working closely and trying to cooperate. There's never been any indication in the two indictments, the two plea agreements, that there's any evidence of wrongdoing by the campaign itself, President Trump. There's no evidence of collusion. So I think that the interview today with Michael Schmidt, Michael was a guest of mine at the golf club today, and I introduced him to the president, and the president said, hey, let's do an interview. And he sat with Michael for a half hour and gave him his take on the world. And it's very typical of the president. He just speaks his mind and tells you what he thinks.
So, Chris, let me ask you, given everything that you said, That's according to the president. He believes that there is no collusion. He believes that there is, they have found nothing. Okay, that's the president saying that. So if that is all so, if I give you that, then why continue to attack the investigation and Mueller? And not just the president, but also the president's supporters, the folks over on the Trump channel, over on the other cable station. Why do that then if there's nothing there?
So it's not the president who says there's been nothing tied with him in Russia. It's that we now know this investigation by Mueller has gone on. Well, it actually started before he was appointed, so it's over a year now, and they have found no evidence in the indictments or the plea agreements with Russian collusion. We know that there's been a House investigation and a Senate investigation that's involved Republicans and Democrats. So far, neither committee has revealed anything involving collusion with the Russians.
You realize the investigation, the scope of the investigation goes beyond collusion, right?
Yeah, but look, CNN and MSNBC has made a case the president colluded with the Russians, the campaign colluded with the Russians.
I cannot speak for MSNBC, but CNN has not made a case. But Chris, hold on. I cannot speak for MSNBC, but CNN has not made the case that the president colluded. CNN is just reporting what is out there and and what should be reported on. We have not made the case for or against collusion. But go on.
Of course you have. And
that's
so,
in your belief, but we have not.
There's no evidence of it yet, and all the smoke and mirrors that have come out of all of the different criticisms of him. And he's saying, look, bring it on. If there's something, the truth is, I think Robert Mueller's an American hero. This guy kept America safe after 9/11. He was the FBI director for more than 10 years, did an incredible job. But there are questions about the investigation, legitimate questions. A number of the prosecutors openly supported President Obama and Hillary in her campaign. When you see that the jurisdiction of this investigation, Don, I think you'll agree, was supposed to examine the Russian involvement in the Trump campaign, and that none of the indictments or the plea agreements so far have anything to do with that, you have to start wondering, are these guys being indicted because they committed a crime or because they are friends and supporters of the president? And I'm still waiting.
So you're saying Michael Flynn did not lie to the FBI?
So far, I'm not seeing it.
Michael Flynn didn't lie to the FBI, Chris?
Michael Flynn admitted in a plea agreement he lied to the FBI, but jurisdiction of the Mueller investigation was collusion and a conspiracy between Trump and the Russians in the election.
It's also obstruction, and the scope goes beyond collusion, though, Chris.
In that plea agreement.
Chris, you have to be honest with the viewer if you're going to be on. The scope of the investigation is not just collusion. It's also Russia hacking or Russia influencing our election. It also can probably include obstruction of justice. It can include money crimes and any other thing that Robert Mueller comes across as he is investigating Russia's influence into our election. It is not just collusion. You must be honest with the American public.
No, but the point is that if I've been watching your show for the past 6 months, I would think the president colluded with the Russians, yet there's no evidence of it.
I have never said the president colluded with the Russians. We have always said there may be no collusion found, Chris. Chris, now, listen, that is a flat-out lie. That's a flat-out lie. We have never said the president colluded.
One piece of evidence that the president or his campaign colluded with.
I'm not an investigator, I'm not an investigator, and I've never made that assertion. So you're posing a question that should be posed to someone else.
Hello?
Yeah, are you there? I'm sorry. Go on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so sorry, go on. So I've never said that, and I've never heard anyone on CNN say that there was evidence of collusion. As a matter of fact, I always hear people preface by saying there may be no collusion, whatever comes from this investigation.
I watch your network. They talk about impeachable offenses all day long on there.
What's wrong with talking about impeachable offenses?
I think Donald Trump could be criticized. I've known him for a long time. He's very open to criticism. It's just when you say something that's not true, that he committed a crime or someone in his family committed a crime or these other individuals involving things that there's no evidence of it, that's where I think people start saying, well, is this a politically motivated investigation?
Well, Chris, you must be watching a different channel because no one has ever said anyone in the president's family or the president has committed a crime. We have people on who discuss the possibility of people committing a crime, but no one has emphatically said on CNN that the president has committed a crime, nor anyone in his family. So if you're saying that we must tell the truth, then you must as well. And the president, speaking of telling the truth, has a history of not telling the truth. As a matter of fact, he made statements yesterday that were completely not truthful, saying he signed more legislation than any president in history, and that is wrong. He signed the least since Eisenhower.
Don, the average GDP growth during the Obama years was 1.5%. Donald Trump's already moving the economy over 3% GDP growth.
And if you talk to any economist, Chris, again, the truth, this all started under President Barack Obama, and he is reaping the rewards of an economy that started long before he became president.
I think you're going to see with this tax bill a major growth of GDP across the country. Businesses are going to invest like crazy. I think, and you know what, the bottom line is the results. Is he going to bring more jobs, grow the economy, strengthen our military and national security? And I think, like in the New York Times report today by Michael Schmidt, I would encourage people to read that report. I mean, this is a president that's very hyper-focused on North Korea as a threat. He's pointed out that for over 25 years, no president has tackled it. He's willing to tackle it. And he says it threatens the long-term viability of our nation. And we can't allow these guys to get intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear, thermonuclear weapons.
Chris, listen, thank you. I got to run because I have to get to the break, but I hope you're right. I hope you're right when it comes to what's going to happen with the GDP. I hope you're right when it comes to what's going to happen overseas and with North Korea. But again, those are all projections into the future. We're talking about things that have already happened.
Keep an open mind. And
absolutely, and you as well.
From the truth. I know you
I would say, I would say also projection is a serious thing. You should take your own words to heart. Keep an open mind and don't run away from the truth as well. Thank you. Happy New Year to you. Appreciate you coming on. We'll be right back.
Celebrate the holidays.
Comes on, but this interview in the New York Times, Bakari, I always find it interesting because many times supporters come on and they don't really have their facts straight, and you have to tell them, and then they accuse you of making things up when the facts are just the facts. What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, it is Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump in the purest sense, and Christopher Ruddy is one of those Donald Trump sycophants that comes on air and just says what Donald Trump wants him to say. I mean, the facts are this. How many people did Barack Obama have charged with a crime? 0. How many people were indicted when Barack Obama was president of the United States? 0. How many people pled guilty to a crime? 0. The fact is, anybody can come on TV and tout the president and tout his ethics and tout his morals and everything else, but he's had 4 individuals, 2 of which have actually already pled guilty, one of which was his national security advisor. They have pled guilty to crimes, and the national security advisor has pled guilty to a crime while he was in the White House, and Paul Manafort, who's been indicted, was the chairman of the president's campaign. Those are facts. And if Christopher Ruddy wants to come on here and say this has nothing to do with the president, this has nothing to do with the president while he was running for office or while he's been in the White House, then he's a bald-faced liar. The fact is, we are still investigating a meeting that happened with the president's son, Donald Trump Jr. And people are asking, why did this meeting occur? It happened because of adoptions. That's BS, Don. We know why it happened. Yeah. It happened because they thought that they could get information from the Russians.
I got to get Ben in. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, look, and I want to say this because I think that this is, what Bakari just said there, I think sums up the election a year ago perfectly. There are a lot of people that feel like that there was special treatment that was given to people that worked for Barack Obama on things that they did that they would have been indicted for if they were Republicans. For example, when you clearly have top secret information on a laptop that you have on a server in the basement of your house, and then you send those top secret classified documents to people that aren't even cleared to see them, and then you forward them to your husband, who, by the way, is in jail by the name of Anthony Weiner. If that was a Republican,
what does that have to do with what we're talking about?
They would have been indicted. Let me
Ben,
finish.
what are you talking about? The FBI already
this is what you do
investigated
every
that.
time.
There have been a million
This is what you do
hearings
every
on
single
it.
time.
It's
Let
water
me finish.
under the
Let me
bridge.
finish
But
my point.
no,
No, it's not. It's water under the bridge for you, Don. It's water under the bridge for you.
No,
It's
we'll
not
be
for
right
the rest of
back. We'll
people
be
in
right
this
back.
country.
Beaches, Turks, and Caicos adds up to the best vacation ever. Like an awesome beach plus an insane water park equals pure happiness.
Sir, it has been litigated.
Of course, because it doesn't fit the narrative.
No, it doesn't. Listen,
No, because it's irrelevant
it's
now,
irrelevant.
Ben. She lost.
It's irrelevant.
Again,
if you're going to talk about it,
I didn't say anything when Bakari was talking earlier, and you had no problem with anything he said because you agreed with it all, Don.
No, it's not because I agree with it all. It's because he's talking about things that had to do with now, not some bull from the past that has been litigated over and over and is not relevant anymore because every time but our emails.
Don,
but
clearly
uranium.
You don't like what I'm saying.
But no, it's not that I don't like what you're saying.
I didn't even say the word uranium, Don.
It's not.
I never said anything about uranium.
That is where you're going to go back to. You go back to the same
No, it's
talking
not.
point.
If you listen to somebody, instead of assuming what they're going to say, then you might learn something.
Get back on track, and let's talk about the New York Times interview that we were discussing, instead of going back in time in a time machine and talking about something and someone who was not president anymore. So again, he says that he believes, Tara, that he believes that he could be treated fairly in the investigation. Yet, over and over and over again, he has said that he believes it is tainted. He says in this interview that he believes it was made up, invented by the Democrats, these Russia allegations, as a hoax and a ruse and as an excuse for losing an election.
Yet our intelligence agencies have unanimously agreed that the Russians did, in fact, meddle in our election. Donald Trump has it stuck in his craw that it somehow undermines legitimacy of his election if he acknowledges what the Russians did. This is something to the chagrin of even his national security folks, everyone. They don't like the fact he continues to call us a hoax because it's not a hoax. And it makes our intelligence community's job that much more difficult because they need to implement policy to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's the real problem here. The fact that he
and
just
no one is doing anything about it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I believe that there are good men and women that are trying to do their jobs despite the president continually stepping on their throats and belittling them in public. But this is his obsession with this is pathological, and he said a lot of other things in this interview, like that he knows the tax bill greater than the CPAs and all these things. It's just his narcissism.
I know foreign policy better than the general. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I'm going to see you New Year's Eve with Andy and Anderson. So let's have some fun. Let's see what I do this year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Gallagher, first off, Diane, what's in the new statement from the Moore team?
Well, I can tell you what's not in there, John, and that's an official concession. I want to give you just a little bit of a synopsis of what's in there a little bit here. He says election fraud experts across the country have agreed that this was a fraudulent election. He then says, I have stood for the truth about God and the Constitution for the people of Alabama. I have no regrets. To God be the glory. A little bit of a clarification there in his statement. By election experts across the country, you must assume that he means the 3 election experts that were quoted in his lawsuit, one of whom is a bit of a notorious conspiracy theorist, someone who peddles JFK assassination theories and the DNC staffer Seth Rich's murder. Also, you mentioned the polygraph test that Roy Moore says he took after the election about those allegations. Well, Roy Moore signed an affidavit saying that he took a polygraph test and passed, saying that he did not know those women and never had any sort of inappropriate sexual relationship with 3 of those accusers. Well, the polygraph administrator didn't write any of that and didn't sign any of that in that lawsuit, at least what's included there. So all we have is Roy Moore signing an affidavit that Roy Moore took a polygraph test and passed it. So there's still a lot of discrepancy in what Roy Moore has claimed in these things, but it does appear, at least at this point, John, that Roy Moore is going to have to either just accept that he lost the election or look at some of his very small options he has if he wants to continue this.
What are those options, Diane?
So the one that would probably suit him best right now is also the one that would probably bankrupt him. He has some time. It's 48 hours from the minute that they certify the election results to request a recount. The thing is, because he isn't within that 0.5% margin of victory, he would have to pay for this on his own. John, he'd have to put a deposit down, and in talking with the Secretary of State, he says that they can't really tell you how much it would cost because of different parts of this. He may want a smaller recount, but if he needs a full statewide recount, we're talking in the 7 figures here, and that doesn't appear to be money that Roy Moore has, at least in any of his fundraising right now.
All right. Diane Gallagher, thanks so much. Let's find out what the Moore team will do. Joining us now is Moore campaign spokeswoman Janet Porter. Janet, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. The state of Alabama certified the election results, saying that Doug Jones won. Is it over?
Thanks, John. It's good to be with you. I think that the issue here that we're looking at is the issue of voter fraud. And interestingly, it was a Democrat who brought the case.
Let's talk about voter fraud in a second. I just want to know what you're doing. Is the election over? Has Roy Moore?
I'm talking with you.
Has Roy Moore conceded?
No, I think you just read his statement. And there are some options, one of which you could file in federal court. I can tell you the option I'm recommending. I think he needs to file and run against Governor Kay Ivey, who certified this fraudulent election. I think we need to find candidates to run against Secretary of State Merrill and Attorney General Marshall, who likewise joined together to ignore 84 pages of evidence and certify an election which has far too many questions about it to really affirm the wishes of the people of Alabama and their right to a fair and free election.
Will he file for a recount in the next 48 hours?
I'm gonna have to let the judge speak for himself. But I do say this: that what we're talking about here is far bigger than a United States Senate race. We're talking about whether or not the people of Alabama have the right and the privilege, the duty to be able to have fair and free elections and make sure that they not only can cast their ballot, but make sure that their ballot is counted and they have assurance that it was counted properly. That's what we don't have.
The Secretary of State certified the election results today. The judge threw out the lawsuit, citing those 84 pages that you provided there, did not think they were worthy to order some kind of halt to the proceedings. What due process have you not been given at this point?
Well, there's a few things that are problematic. One is that they dismissed it without, I don't even know if the Secretary of State read the 84 pages of evidence, and that's what really is screaming from the pages of this complaint.
Janet,
and what it said, let me finish if I may.
It's not evidence,
is what
though.
it
It's
says.
not evidence. It's an argument citing 4 election experts, people you call election experts, that a lot of people...
I know, and you're trying to say, I mean, maybe the guy got a C- in spelling in the 4th grade. You know, you can discount anybody you want.
No,
the guy's got
four
math degrees.
He said the Holocaust.
Three math degrees, 4 books of...
One of them said the Holocaust didn't happen. He said 6 million Jews weren't killed.
Let me refer you to an internet blog, Abraham Lincoln's internet blog. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. That's
Abraham Lincoln was not alive for the Holocaust, Janet. One of your experts...
He wasn't alive to make a blog as well. It was a joke.
One of your experts, Jim Condit Jr., tweeted that there's an evil Jewish shadow government in the U.S. He claims it's preposterous to say Hitler wanted to kill all the Jewish people. That is
let me
one
tell
of your.
you,
That's
don't
one of your
believe everything you read. Number one, he is an expert. 40-year.
There's video of him saying this.
John, did you have me on to talk, or just to talk to me? Here's what we know about John Condit. He has nearly 40 years' experience in election machines, and what he found is that this election system software is made up of a secret computer program in Omaha, Nebraska. And you heard from the Secretary of State. I hope you asked him the question that wasn't asked earlier, and that is, hey, if you guys don't keep the ballot images, why not? Because that's what federal law requires you to do, to have a record, to maintain that record, and make sure that it is not destroyed. That is the case. What's happening is that the Democrats in the state of Alabama have said, we want to preserve the evidence. We want to preserve the ballot images. And Secretary of State John Merrill said, no, we think we should destroy it. And by the way,
Janet,
that's a federal crime that brings with it a sentence of $5,000 and 5 years in jail.
Does it concern you that your election machine expert, Jim Condit Jr., is a man who said there's an evil shadow Jewish government and claims
I certainly don't believe that.
It's
and you know what?
to say Hitler killed all Jews, because
I don't believe that's true.
I'm
just going to tell you, he didn't say that. He didn't say that. What he knows about what we had him on the case, we submitted an affidavit because the guy's an expert, an undisputed expert
Janet,
in the election software
Jewish government.
programs.
He absolutely
I don't believe
said
it.
there's.
Sorry,
we
don't believe it.
Post,
and I want to say this, and I've said it earlier.
We will post the video
I don't think you're going to find.
This.
Okay, well, you know what? I can tell you where I stand on that. I don't know much about election machines. That's what John Condit knows about. But I can tell you that you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who's more pro-Israel. So I celebrated when that embassy was moved to Jerusalem.
He tweeted it. We have the tweet. Can we put the tweet up? Do we have the tweet? Do we have the tweet we can put up? Here it is. Evil Jews in the Jewish shadow government must be highlighted, even though, of course, all Jews are not in that. But
by the way,
is
John,
what USA is fighting.
You know what you're not putting up on the screen?
Okay.
Oddly enough, you're not putting up his 39 years experience in election machines. But let's look at the other three experts who, independent of each other, said that the votes just in one county, just in Jefferson County, and people say, oh, that's racist, pointing to Jefferson County. It was actually the Republican precincts where the votes were moved from Roy Moore to Doug Jones, and they can prove it. In fact, one of the experts with all of the degrees who's nationally renowned.
I'm sorry. Prove what? Excuse me. You said he could prove it. What can he prove?
Prove that in one county, 20 precincts in one county, the votes were moved from Roy Moore to Doug Jones.
That's not what he proves. Have you read the 84? Have you read the 84 pages?
I have read the arguments. He
doesn't even begin to suggest that he has proven that those votes were moved. What he suggests, what the
expert said in his affidavit, if you've read it,
is it's an anomaly. He says he doesn't think that voting pattern in that county, in that district, could possibly happen. He doesn't say he has proof that those votes were changed.
But let me just tell you how much proof there is, and it's in the affidavit. If you read it further, what you'll see is that there is a 1 in 15 billion chance that occurred naturally. In other words, 1 in 15 billion mathematical chance that was not fraud. So if you don't think that's proof, I think it's proof.
His argument essentially
beyond any reasonable doubt.
Well, first, again, he does not make the case that it's beyond any reasonable doubt.
It's in there. I've got the case in front of you. You want me to quote it for you? I've got it here.
Is that too many Republicans did vote the party line in this district. You don't think that Republicans had a reason not to vote the party line in Jefferson County?
Well, it's interesting that when you look across the entire state, everybody follows a pattern in virtually every single precinct of every single county, except these certain areas that were Republican with high voter turnout for Roy Moore, and suddenly there's the pattern. You look at it on the charts; it's all mapped out, and you can see it in the affidavit and in the research that was submitted. Something that its Secretary of State John Merrill ignored. But what it shows is they reach a certain point, and boom, everything's off the charts. It does not follow any pattern of any of the rest of the state.
So we talked to election experts. Again, you cite 4 election experts, one of whom is a Holocaust denier. We talked to 2 today, at least 2. Justin Levitt, Loyola Law School.
Who's an expert on machines?
You keep saying this man's an expert on machines. It doesn't bother you that he says that there's an evil shadow Jewish government? Hang on.
I'm just going to tell you, if it does, of course it bothers me.
Is he the only election machine expert? The only election machine expert you could find is one who says there's an evil shadow Jewish government?
If I would have known that, if I would have known that this is a tweet that if it really happened, I never would have suggested
he also has given speeches, and he has said that Hitler didn't want to kill all the Jews. It takes a Google search. This is not like extensive research.
Well, we worked Christmas to put together all of the facts and 84 pages of them so that we could make sure that this would be presented and not ignored, but unfortunately it was ignored by Secretary of State John Merrill. You know, it's interesting. Y'all have this assassinate the character. Instead of looking at the evidence, you want to go after anybody that might have said something off the cuff or something that was inappropriate. And I'll be the first to say it's completely inappropriate. I completely disagree with if that was in fact said.
Think about his judgment. Maybe a guy who says that Hitler didn't want to kill the Jews, maybe that guy doesn't have all his facts right on a few other things.
Maybe what I want to tell you is, all right, let's throw out John Condit. Let's just forget about the voting machines and the secret software program and the fact that they destroy all the evidence. That doesn't seem to bother you, but it bothers the people of Alabama. And I believe the people of Alabama are going to come out in a primary election against John Merrill or general election against him. The same with Attorney General Steve Marshall and Governor Kay Ivey. And I hope Judge Moore runs against her personally.
And one of the things you have suggested, you haven't said whether or not he's going to test this election. You said you hope he challenges Kay Ivey. That might be news if that happens, if he doesn't decide to contest this election the next day and a half. But again, I just want to make clear, we have spoken to other election experts, Justin Levitt at Loyola Law School, Charles Stewart at MIT. They both analyzed the returns, and they agreed that any claims of fraud are totally unfounded. In regards to turnout anomalies, which is the basis of your voter fraud. Hang on. Levitt told us, quote, to attribute those anomalies to fraud without any further reliable evidence of actual wrongdoing is nothing more than magical reasoning and conspiracy theory. There's just no
this is y'all love labels. This is your favorite thing to do. Try to do a character assassination. Try to say that we give somebody that said something off the cuff
you keep saying denying the Holocaust is off the cuff, as you know.
No, it's not off the cuff. It's inappropriate. Let me make clear.
I didn't like his hair that day.
Let's
He's
throw him
saying
out.
the Holocaust didn't happen.
Listen to me. That's a bad thing. But let me just say, let's throw out his 40 years of expertise in election machines. Let's look at the other three experts. Let's look at the experts who have shown independent of each other. And by the way, one of those experts was a Democrat who said, I got involved in election integrity because he felt that Bernie Sanders was being cheated. Look, this should matter to everyone. It's not about whether you like Roy Moore or not, or whether you like Doug Jones or not. It's about whether we have fair and free elections. And I'm telling you one thing, the Secretary of State, John Merrill, was on the wrong side, not only today with certifying a fraudulent election, but he's been on the wrong side about destroying evidence of the ballot images. This is a bad thing, no matter what party you're in.
It's 21,000 votes. It's 21,000 votes. We are going to talk to him.
Which are made up for in one county.
We're going to talk to him. We're going to talk to him after we talk to you. We'll ask him if they destroyed evidence there. We'll ask him what he thinks.
He's going to say, I'll tell you what he's going to say, the machines don't really keep those. Well, actually, we have evidence in Arizona with a lawsuit there that said that they actually can take that evidence. But look, federal law says you're supposed to keep all of the election evidence. He's destroying it. He is not saving it. And he's a guy that should be accountable for that. And I think the people of Alabama are going to challenge him in the primary or general election.
He did vote for Roy Moore. Let me ask you finally on the polygraph test. And again, Judge Moore signed an affidavit saying he took the test. Will you provide the name of the polygraph provider? Will you provide the questions?
That's the thing.
Will you provide
John,
the questions?
if there was a hearing, that's when that would have come out. If we would have, Judge Hardwick would have had a hearing, if John Merrill would have paid attention to what was submitted in the 84 pages, then they would have said, yeah, let's present the evidence. Let's look at the polygraph. By the way, Judge Moore said, not only did I do this independent, this polygraph test, not only did I succeed in passing it, which is no shock to me.
But we don't know what it is.
I knew he was innocent.
But we don't know what it is.
But let me tell you what else he said.
We don't know what it is because you won't give us the name
because
of the person
there was no hearing.
Or what's
But if there was a hearing, you would have all found out and the world could have seen. But let me tell you one thing he said.
What was he asked in the polygraph?
What came out of it, I'll just tell you the test results, is that he did not know any of these women who made these accusations against him. And he did not engage in any sexual misconduct.
He did not know any of the, hang on one second, because we have, I think, an interview.
Women who accused him of sexual misconduct. I'm not talking about teenagers that he may have been family friends with. I'm talking about the ones that made the allegations of sexual misconduct. He knew none of them, and he passed the polygraph test to prove it.
Let's just play the sound we have. I think this is the interview with Sean Hannity when he talks about remembering at least one of the girls. Let's listen.
I do recognize, however, the names of two of these young ladies, Debbie Wesson and Gloria Thacker, which they have a maiden, that's their maiden name. I remember her as a good girl. I seem to remember her as a good girl.
So he remembers
that. By the way,
go ahead.
Well, they did not accuse him of any sexual misconduct. What Debbie had to say is she said, well, he was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And that when I got engaged, Roy Moore bought a gift and a congratulatory note for my fiance. Let me just say, I've had lots of ex-boyfriends that never gave my husband a wedding gift, engagement gift, or a congratulatory note. He was a family friend, and that's what showed that bears that out.
Is the reason for including the polygraph test? Because he passed a polygraph test, you wanted the judge to throw out the election results?
You know, John, will you let me finish? I need to say this because it's important. Right. You all act like the forged yearbook was the holy grail, that we should look at this woman who forged a yearbook and admitted she lied. That's evidence,
there was
right?
A date.
But Judge Moore, let me finish. He passed the polygraph test, and he said, I will go before any polygraph that you guys want, that you as a state organization choose. He will go and he will be tested, but you don't see that from the accusers.
Janet, we're unfortunately running out of time because I do want to talk to the Secretary of State after the break here, but just finally, will Doug Jones be the next senator from Alabama?
Well, I think that that may be the case, but I do know that the Secretary of State, John Merrill, that his days are limited, and if the people of Alabama want fair and free elections, I know of at least 650,000 people who do not like the fact that he wants to destroy evidence and certify a fraudulent election, according to 84 pages and affidavits of experts from around the country.
Janet Porter, thank you for coming on and making your case. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill, you heard him talk about quite a bit there. He joins us next. And just ahead, new information about the truck that shielded our view of the president on the golf course. We found one that's identical. Where we found it might surprise you. So will the answer we got when we asked about it.